So today we're going to try to do a Will It Run video on this 1947 Oldsmobile straight six engine with hydromatic transmission. I bought this engine earlier today from a guy out near Madison who used to run a restoration shop that is basically closed down. This thing cost me $100. I bought it for just for the hydromatic transmission that's on it. It's the same engine and transmission as is in my 1947 Oldsmobile. In fact, it came out of essentially an identical car. All the spark plugs look pretty good on it, with the exception of number 3. Looks like someone closed the gap with a hammer. It shouldn't be possible for pistons or anything to hit the spark plugs in these engines, so I'm not exactly sure why that would be other than human activity. So this engine is a little bit seized. I wish I had the right size socket. I don't know exactly what size the crank bolt is on this, but it's bigger than my 11/16 socket, and I don't really have any bigger sockets on hand, and it's too stuck for this wrench to budge it in either direction. I wish my breaker bar, which is actually just a piece of plumbing pipe, I wish it had slightly bigger ends where I could fit it over the crescent wrench, but it doesn't. So basically, since it's late right now, I can't get the right size socket to put a long breaker bar on the crank. I'm going to play around a little bit. I managed to crack loose the 2 bolts that hold the starter motor on, so I'm going to pull the starter motor off, grab a crowbar I've got, and see if I can gently pry on the flywheel teeth and see if slightly more leverage is enough to get this thing to move. In addition to removing the spark plugs, I filled all the cylinders, or, well, I wouldn't say filled, but I added a generous amount of PB Blaster penetrating oil to see if that helps anything. I'm probably not going to use this engine even if it does run great, but given that its unlikeliness to be used makes it a toy, I'm going to play with it. So I got the starter motor out, and I've got a couple of little pry bars here. We're gonna try prying on the starter gear. Wow. That is good and properly stuck. Well, that may be beyond what I can do anything about tonight. Okay, next day, and I got a 1-inch 6-point half-inch drive socket to use with my breaker bar. We're gonna see if we can unstick this engine, and also see if we can film unsticking the engine. So, first let's just try the breaker bar on its own. I'm dropping spark plugs. Yay! That's exactly what I was trying to do. No, it wasn't. At least they won't fall out. See if I can smack myself in the... That's loosening the bolt, or tightening the bolt. That doesn't bode well. Yeah. Wow. I am literally spinning the bolt. That is, man. And that's with it having PB blaster soaking it overnight. Now, I think it's safe to say this engine is kind of toast. It's going to make getting the transmission off really fun. And by fun, I mean generally unpleasant. Well, this escalated quickly. Prying on the flywheel was getting just ever so slightly amount of movement, as though the crankshaft was bending like a spring. Yeah, given all of that mess, I can see why this was stuck, and still is stuck. My strategy now that I'm no longer trying to make this engine work is to get some wood blocks, put them inside the piston, pistons, and whale on said wood blocks with a large sledgehammer. Clearly someone else was trying to do something about this, because there's no head gasket on this engine. It looks like someone put silicone or something down to keep the elements out after taking the head off after it rusted. I still have a piece of them. Yes, I do. Someone glued the head onto the engine with this weird greenish transparent glue. That big blob of it was in one of the coolant passages, but clearly someone opened this up and saw this mess, went hell no, and put it back together. Another telltale sign of that is that many of the head bolts were finger tight. Some were torqued to the moon, some were torqued probably reasonable, and a lot of them were finger tight, so yeah. This engine has already been given up on at least once, and I'm probably going to continue the tradition. But I do need to at least get it unstuck so I can separate the transmission. I did some more research, and it looks like there are snap rings that keep the shaft that the fluid coupling is splined onto, the fluid coupling being what in a newer transmission would be called the torque converter. There are snap rings that keep that from coming apart, so I don't want to try separating until I can spin the engine over and get at all of the bolts around the perimeter of this gear here, which you probably can't see in the darkness. So, nothing to it but to do it, I guess. In the next installment of this series, the valves are all seized, the crankshaft is seized. It's already obvious the crankshaft is seized because of the pistons. The camshaft is seized. So someone apparently took the head off this engine, gave up, and then glued it back on.